Hey everyone. All right. Thank you for taking a look at the agenda and the planning issue and adding a few items here. I think we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so the main thing for planning, for reviewing the planning issue, I really just want to focus on priorities, not the individual items here. So we will not be going through every single bullet point. Let me share my screen and we can just at least talk about the major topics and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, so probably the biggest thing is that our formal support for Project Studio is done as of this milestone. Obviously, things don't really fit within the planning boundaries. And so if you are still working on a few tasks here and there, it makes sense to take them to completion here. I'd avoid picking up anything brand new if you can help it. If you do find yourself getting pulled into Project Studio work that is not clearly related to the design system, let me and Paul know. We'll figure it out. For Project Studio, one of the things we are looking at working on now is sort of the post-launch issues, reintegrating things back into the design system. There are a couple bugs that are more clearly related to the design system. We've got those documented here, but essentially this is supposed to be very clearly within the scope of the design system and not random issues that are floating around. So that's really the focus for that. But then after this, really the biggest priority is the page templates and sort of preparing for this bigger brand refresh, brand redesign. It's not exactly clear what this will entail. All we know is that it's going to be big. It's going to happen probably around Q1. And so the idea behind templates is that we are preparing for this. If we can implement templates, we'll be able to achieve bigger design changes more easily. That's sort of the background behind that. Sasha's identified 2 templates to start with. Yeah, jump in on those if you've got thoughts or ideas or want to contribute. I think there is a lot to do around that. The other big thing around the brand identity stuff is the sneak peek design explorations that Sasha and Julia worked on a month or 2 ago now. We've gotten the direction to essentially to move forward on this with anything we feel confident on. And so we're starting out with neutralizing the components and then looking at some other refinements as well. Tokenization is still important because it will help us achieve any bigger brand redesign. It's tough to know exactly what to tokenize since we don't have that design direction yet. And so I think at this point, we're mostly focusing on categories and laying the groundwork for adding new tokens. Let me stop there to see if anyone has any questions or comments about this first bit.
Oh, there we go. I don't see anything about getting tokens into Figma variables.
My understanding is that we are pausing on, sorry, you mean, yeah, we're pausing on tokens into Figma right now because there are going to be Figma updates and it makes sense to wait for those.
Okay.
Paul, is that
It's
right?
not
For the full-on work, I do think that there's an intermediate piece that Dan posted about recently that I'll talk to Scott later today in our one-on-one. And there is an item here, the sync design tokens with Figma REST API that's listed under the heading. Is that the same thing that you're talking about, Jeremy?
yeah. My use case is I just wanted to call that out that as we're working on page templates and all of those things that go into that, spacing is a critical part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're just going to be entering manual numbers, which is going to be error prone, and it's going to be hard to it'll be manual to update anything later. And so we also can't do more things around container query-esque things in Figma where you can just flip a switch and say, oh, it's more like this, until we get support for spacing variables in Figma. So that'll be one of the areas where like page composition stuff, templating stuff will
Do we
be
have the capability to do spacing tokens in Figma now?
Yeah. What do you mean by do spacing tokens?
To, I guess, in the same way, like to make them available for use in the sort of template design work that Jeremy is talking about. I guess not. I guess then that would just wouldn't be just Jeremy. That would not just be the template work, but I assume that would also mean for everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe there's an item that we should pull off and chat about in the on this, because like the work that Scott was going to do, even if we could move forward on this, which right now it sounded like, and I know Jeremy, you would know more about this, but like we've asked for as to how they're going to be doing this soon. And so us implementing something and then have it change like doesn't make a huge amount of sense. So like in general, the larger amount of work we wanted to pause on. But I think there is maybe some interim work, but any of the work that Scott would be doing would be specifically around a way to keep the code and the design in sync. It wouldn't be about like creating net new things in Figma
right.
that weren't there. So I don't know, like if there's a separate work stream that's like defining tokens, like coming to an agreement on like the tokens and then creating them in Figma that would later be synced. Because right now I don't think syncing is working like in general. So my original assumption was that spacing tokens would be just another thing to sync, but it almost sounds like from what you're saying, creating these in Figma is completely blocked by engineering, which
yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that with spacing, like we haven't done anything for like semantic spacing, and same with some of the typography stuff where we're just leveraging like scales basically. And I think that's fine. We could actually use that and then codify like, okay, we're using, spacing 3 for this. So I think everything today exists for us to use. It would be like, do we want to just as is be able to bring that over? Because I think spacing probably aligns with the spec. So there wouldn't be, I don't feel like many surprises with the Figma workflow. And if we want to hold on that, that's fine. I think Sasha and I could even do something interim. I'd like to talk to Dan about it too, just from a Figma perspective, but where we could essentially stand up a separate spacing library as just like a placeholder, create variables that mimic what exists in code, and then leverage that library just so we have like something consistent that's modeled after that. And then later we can go back in and like refactor the Figma files to do that, to actually use like variables from the library that we're syncing rather than just like something standalone. But for now, it's like it's not a huge concern as Sasha and I build this, but if we do it today, it's going to be refactoring probably either way. But then if we were to not do anything and give this in the hands of designers, there's not going to be the ability to have these things updated, right? So if we're using
keep control
8 pixels and then they've got it, and then like, oh, we updated to 16, they're never going to get that update, because a lot of the stuff right now is probably not going to be a component just because of like, it's just going to be more starter copy paste. So they'll never get any downstream updates from us if something's not tokenized. Where if we were like, oh, we're using spacing, 6 here, they get it. Oh, spacing 6 updates, whatever, then we would at least have that connection. There still could be that breakage if it's not a component, I suppose, but
and so this isn't the implementation of something like this doesn't need any of the new Figma stuff. It's working that it would work the same way as all of the other tokens that we've been defining over the last couple of months.
I think so. Sasha, do you agree? Like we're not doing any special transforms or anything that would be super
No,
unique since it's a scale. Yeah.
No, I think the only other thing we discussed about like these layouts are that we would love to use like the slots feature, but that's also not available yet. Right? That might be like another consideration, like another thing we eventually have to refactor down the line.
But this seems to me like another category of tokens, not sync design tokens with Figma REST API. That drive, because that's the one that is kind of paused, is like creating this plugin, for lack of a better word, that enables like a two-way sync for all tokens, not this new category of tokens in general. And so like all tokens would be blocked by what I'm thinking is blocked. But if this is just like a new category that works alongside every other token, and it just is the bridge inside of our own repo, and then that's like a different story. We could have.
Yeah, I guess the question is, do we implement spacing tokens using the current approach so that you can start using them in templates during this milestone?
Yeah, I think I'd like to talk to Dan, but I think we could today. Like, I'm just looking quick, and I can take this offline too. But
let's I'd say let's follow up on this, because I think there's a good question here about do we do this milestone, aim it for next milestone? Because it sounds like if we follow through on this path, we will be releasing spacing tokens for the entire design team, not just for our internal work. And that feels like that will require a little extra
it depends.
Communication, documentation.
It depends, because one of our initial approaches was like, we only allow the constants to be used for design system team. Anything semantic and higher gets published to the library for everybody else to consume. So it would be along those lines, where it's like, these are constants, like it's a constant scale ramp that we're using as a design system team. It doesn't necessarily have to make its way forward. But if we're not going to have semantic spacing, then there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to be used by everybody as well. So I don't have like massive concerns with that at the moment.
Okay, so we essentially have a follow-up question on how do we approach spacing tokens in essentially the next 1 to 2 milestones.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just note that for now, we're just going to be using like static pixel values for right now. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think I guess around the templates, I don't think it's a requirement to deliver assets for the entire design team to use at the end of this milestone. I think the bigger thing is this visual sort of refinement and exploration, sort of making sure that the templates can work across, all of these different scenarios that we may not have considered originally. I think if we've got assets at the end of the milestone, that's a great bonus, but I think the bigger thing is finalizing the direction, maybe starting to build assets for our internal use, code assets perhaps, but not Figma assets yet.
Okay. No, I think that's great. I'm looking quick too, and I notice our spacing scales in rems, and obviously Figma is going to work in percentage or pixels, so there'll probably be some other work there anyways. But yeah, that sounds good. That's helpful. Anything else, Sasha, or did I speak about any of that?
No, I think that summarizes pretty much about like spacing. The only other thing was like my point from earlier with like the slots feature from Figma. But then again, we can also work around that limitation for now. So shouldn't be a big blocker, right?
Totally agree.
All right, good deal. All right, so then I guess we'll follow up on the spacing tokens questions in Slack, and try to figure out if we need to basically meet face to face to talk about this stuff again.
Sorry, just one other follow up?
Yeah.
I just like the token studio for Figma actually has REM support. So that might be something we can look into too.
I know we have before and opted not to use it, but
Okay.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
there's some good values there. But
one of the things about some of these other systems is I don't think that they were following the spec exactly, and they had their own way of doing it, and so it may have changed because I know Figma is moving to the spec, and so some of these other ones might. But yeah, I know when Scott and others originally looked into it, there was a reason that we went the way that we did,
Yeah.
and in the long run, it looks like it's worked out because Figma has now committed to matching ours, or not matching ours, but matching the spec.
Yeah, Token Studio, I think does, and I think actually the people behind Token Studio are the ones working on the spec as well. So they're coupled together. So
All right.
All right. Any more discussion items for templates or tokens? All right, moving on then. So the next big category of work is around expanding the design system coverage. Essentially, we've been doing like audits and reviews of all these different areas to figure out what should come into the system. Julia's reviewed the AI design patterns, Annabelle's been reviewing the growth design patterns, Chad's been looking at view shared. And so we've got all this together, and there are a couple areas where we can essentially get started in this milestone, things that other teams need. The one big one is around this messaging components issue that has been floating around for a while. The growth teams want to sort of better document and improve how we do essentially feature discovery. And so that's closely related to this old issue about alerts and notices and all the different ways we inform people about things. And so the idea is to come back around to that and blend those together. Promotional banners and popovers are related to that. And so we want to formalize the visual style for those and get those documented in the design system. And then coming out of view shared, Chad's noticed that there'd be a lot of benefit to including a number of JS utilities around date formatting. And then the multi-step form component kind of cuts across both view shared and growth. And so that's something we're going to pull in as well. I think all of these still need a little more documentation, but Annabelle and Julia are both out for the next 2 weeks. And so we're not really expecting to move on those immediately, really until after their break in 2 weeks here. And then also Dan's moving forward on the CRUD component along with Thomas. And so I'm excited to see that one move forward, and we'll have to figure out essentially what comes after this milestone, after we can hopefully get something to implementation here. Any questions about that work? All right, then moving on. The sort of fallback work for a lot of us is the component maturity epic. Annabelle and Chad both got started around alerts and paginations in the last milestone, and they've been just churning through a lot of the issues. I think that's fantastic. I'm really happy to see the progress made on those. And so essentially, I want to ask everyone to pick up a single component each milestone and start working through this process. Sasha and Jeremy are working through buttons because that's a massive trove of issues to figure out, and it kind of fits in nicely with the project, with the sneak peek work as well. But yeah, so if you see issues and comments with people asking about things that are years old, that's essentially where that is coming from. If you're going through these issues and you see something that needs more engineering support, add a label, please tag me and Paul, we'll prioritize that. Or if you're an engineer going through these and you see something that needs more design support, add a UX label and then tag us as well, and we'll pull that into the next milestone of planning there. Any questions about the component maturity work? right, and then Thomas is still working on a couple of issues around the friction cognitive load, but I cannot speak to that. And so, Paul, I don't know if there's an update that you can give about that work.
Yeah, there's two ongoing things. One is the autocomplete stuff. So Thomas has been exploring that, has some already some exploration. Some MRs have gone through about just adding more code comments in JS doc. So you've probably seen those go through already. And a new plugin recommendation. So it looks like we're going to be able to have autocomplete in most IDEs through that work. And then separately, Mark is looking into getting AI to better ingest our and he's writing up the recommendations, I think either today or tomorrow. But long story short, it's still really fragmented. There's a lot of pieces. So he's going to have a couple of different recommendations. And we're going to focus first on internal reviews like Duo versus some of the more external things like Bod and Figma Make, but then more to go on those as well.
I'll be excited for the autocomplete once that gets working. That seems like that'll help out a lot. All right. Beyond that, I'm not going to go through all of these points in the other section, but please take a look at some of these issues. Some of them are bugs, and if you've got some context on them, they could be good small tasks to pick up. And then the final category, this is just a list of the various contributions that are happening from outside of the design system that we are supporting or keeping an eye on in some way. Yeah. Dan is mentioning specifically the field grid component. I think he's had to step away here, but this is just another example of one where Dan is working with Mark to get this documented in the design system in some way. So we just want to keep track of the support and make sure that we are aware of these different areas where our time is going. Dan, I see that you are back. Is there anything that you want to mention about this field grid component?
Maybe. So something that's quite interesting on this is Mark ran some usability studies with it on user testing, which I think worked reasonably well, as this is something that's net new that hasn't been tested in the product yet. And when I spoke to him earlier today, I need to come back with him on what the next steps are, and he isn't sure who's going to build it, whether it's going to be asking our team to build it or someone in Create. But it's been pretty good so far, I think.
Dan, do you know if there's been like accessibility testing on it? I ask because of multi-column focus order kind of things.
There's only pictures of it. How it gets constructed is the next step. So if you've got ideas or input on that, then now is a good time to input them. Some of the earlier spec work I saw for it had a defined, here is the order of information. So that kind of level of detail is being thought about.
So will it be like multiple columns and then you like the flow goes through each column?
Let's consult if you click on the issue, the design management, while it still exists, image 3 is called content flow.
All right. Yeah, because if that's the flow, we're after, we can actually leverage CSS columns maybe for this, which would keep with like keeping the focus order. That would just be out of the box. So we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, but that's like an implementation detail. But just putting it out there, we could use CSS multiple columns for that, but potentially. I will add a link.
Nice, thank you.
Well, thanks, Dan, for working with Mark on the proposal and helping shepherd it into something that is tangible. Jeremy, I appreciate you doing that with Nick Leonard on the disclosure patterns. Annabelle is also working with Katie McCoy and Becca on the hotspot component. You know, it's kind of clear that people need a lot of encouragement and nudging to make contributions, especially, you know, full on patterns and components. And so it does seem like it's very useful to essentially partner with them and, you know, kind of help them through the process. So I appreciate that effort. I think that is a great model for us to be following in the future here.
One extra bit of context for the field grid component is I think the main push for this is coming from Marcel van Ramadan and trying to push Create to be an example of how to work with pajamas. So I think a lot of the nudging, just a plus one what you're saying, Chris, that there seems to be a need for a lot of nudging, and in this case the nudging's coming from top down.
That's great. Marcel can push and we can pull a little bit, and then it'll help everyone. All right. Does anyone have anything else to discuss or cover today? We're at the end of the agenda here.
I want to mention one
Yeah.
thing, Chris, is that there's a lot of like really positive things here, and our team is not really historically good at sharing that out, like in blog form or other what's happening at GitLab posts. It would be great to have some of those efforts like appended as like official efforts as part of these things, so that we can kind of publicize the work and like capture like some really good examples of what the design system is doing and how it's just helping in different ways across the org.
I think that's a great point. One thing that's going to be starting essentially this week, Jonah is doing like a UX week in review that he's going to be passing up to Bill and Manav, and all teams will be contributing to that. And so we will have at least some kind of weekly update that Paul and I are going to put together for him. But then we've also talked about, you know, some kind of regular newsletter communication, something like that. And so, yeah, I agree. We definitely need to do a better job of publicizing and communicating what we're doing. I think once Paul and I get a bit more organized around this idea of a newsletter, that will be a good outlet for that.
Yeah, just following up on that, I guess I had a question for all of you. So I did pitch the newsletter to Chris, and then we're going to talk to Valerie about it. She's out this week. If we were to do that, would it be something internal, kind of like the loop? Would it be more we want to post it externally? Would you want to post to it? So I think that's one of the biggest things around getting these things off the ground that I've experienced both here and at other companies is like, sometimes there's an idea because there's a couple of things that we want to post out, but then long term it kind of fizzles. It's going to take more than just Chris and I obviously writing this thing and producing content. So just have a think about that. We'll follow up, I guess, with you all, but have a think of like, yes, like I would be interested in contributing to it, or here's how I could. And then for the weekend review, Chris and I will obviously try to pull topics, but this is stuff where it's going to go out. We're going to have these points in every Thursday. So it's going to be a constant stream. So just feel free to bring it up in this call or in the channel of like, hey, this would be really good for weekend review, because sometimes it is hard to know the right time to talk about something that obviously spans multiple weeks. Like, which week is it good to feature something? Is it that it's about to kick off? Is it that it's done? Is it that it's turned the corner? Is it that we want review and eyes on it? Like, there's a lot of reasons why we would want to feature something. And it can be hard to know exactly. So if we can rely on you all to help, like say like surface stuff, we can obviously help, formalize it and publish it out and get it into the right spot.
Chad, say the thing.
I probably could have marked this as read only, but yeah, I think that this is a neat idea. I do willing to participate in it. I think historically with this kind of effort, the part that I have the most trouble with is thinking about what. I feel like I have a lot of excitement to create it, but I'm like, whoa, what do you actually talk about? So I think we have a lot of things going on, so that kind of fills the funnel. I think there's a nice thought leadership opportunity if it is something we can share externally. And what I was about to write when I started talking is that I think the medium is something interesting to consider here, because we already have a YouTube channel. We have the ability to, post videos there. I don't know if it ends up being maybe less effort to like, record and kind of roughly edit a video of kind of talking about some of this stuff or presenting it rather than like writing out a blog post, and whether or not that's something that would get consumed more or less. But I think there's a lot of interesting opportunity there.
All right, I think Paul and I will take this and come up with the actual plan here. We'll bring it back to everyone and we'll see how it goes here over the next few weeks. Dan, you had a read only about design token questions. We will follow up with you, Sasha, and Jeremy, and follow up on the discussion and see if there's anything that we need to focus on here in the upcoming milestone. All right, I think that is it for us today. Thanks a lot, everyone. Yeah, comment on the planning issue if you've got any other further questions. Otherwise, we'll see you in the issues.